So I want to start by introducing our keynote speaker, Danny Baker. Thank you so much for coming all the way down to be with us today. I think many of you know at this point, Danny is a self-taught farmer and edible forest gardener. And she began planting and planting the enchanted edible forest, a permaculture inspired acre of over 300 different food producing plants in 2013. And so you have become familiar with her book that she has available in the back. And so I encourage you to check that out. And I just want to say thank you so much again for being with us today to talk about native food plants to feed pollinators and people.
And thank you so much for inviting me. I really appreciate it. And thank you all for coming. This is very exciting. Okay, so this is the topic that I'm discussing today. Oops, it's not.
I don't get it.
Okay, just to show you where I'm located, the star is Wellesley Island. We're about 2 hours southeast of Ottawa, right in the middle of the St. Lawrence River in northern New York State. It's about 3.5 hours by car to this location.
Danny, on the side of that thing, I think you got to turn it on.
Thank you. All right, let's try this up. Good. So that's the shape of my logo. The farm logo is the shape of the island. It's a 9-mile long island. And our farm is located inland at the base of that windmill. So we're very diversified, certified organic farm by Note from New York. We have meat goats, we have beef cows, and they're both certified 100% grass fed. We have some ducks and chickens, we have annual vegetables, and we have some agritourism ventures. So we give tours, that's me giving a tour in the edible forest. We have a few campsites on our property. We host volunteers year round. And we often, before COVID, we had quite a few events and we just started up again. We have events at the farm in the edible forest. And we now have a tree house for rent. So it's a 2-story cottage suspended among trees in the back of our farm property. We have 102 acres, so it's in the back of the 67-acre side. And it's on Airbnb now, if anyone's interested. So we started the farm 19 years ago. And in the 7th year, I attended a 2-hour class by Steve Gabriel, who came up to our cooperative extension office in Jefferson County to give a talk on permaculture. I had never even heard the term before, but the concepts made so much sense to me that I decided there and then I was going to plant an edible forest. I came home, I told my partner Dave, I need a fence because we have a lot of deer pressure on the island. He built me a fence around about 1/2 acre, and the rest is history. So just a few shots of the garden. So peonies are edible, by the way, you may not know that. This is right now, my cherries are ripe. This is an apricot tree with some beach plums in the background and black-eyed Susans. Later in summer, this is a fall shot. Winter. So what are virtues of native perennial food plants? Well, first of all, they provide food and habitat for native pollinators and wildlife. They're relatively disease and pest resistant. Many tolerate a range of soil and habitat conditions. They're not fussy. They require minimal care. So for example, there's a native currant called clove currant that I rarely have to prune compared to European currants that I have to prune annually. Resilient and face the vagaries of weather. They have multiple uses. They range in size, so I'm going to talk about them from the tall trees to shrubs, ground covers, and even vines. They offer multi-season landscape appeal. So if you're just landscaping with food plants, I'm always very interested in what they look like, at least for 3 seasons, sometimes even 4. So I will talk about that. And also, they produce fresh food from March through November. So what are pollinators? Well, I don't have any formal training, but to me, a pollinator is anything that moves from flower to flower. So even ants in the upper shot, they're moving around on a lovage flower. Moths, butterflies, bees of all kinds. wasps, birds. And beneficial insects also benefit from flowers. They often eat pollen or nectar. And these are just a few beneficial insects. My favorite is the lower left. It's parasitic wasp. Probably you're all familiar with them, but they're tiny little wasps, maybe an eighth to a quarter inch long. There's several families of them. And they feed on very tiny flowers. So both the carrot family and elderberry, anything with a tiny flower, even the center of daisies and that family. And then when they're ready to lay their eggs, they lay them on or in soft-shelled pests like potato beetles or caterpillars. So it's really good to have them around and have plenty of flowers for them to feed on through the whole season. Just to show you the diversity of native pollinators, this is just a chart showing 16 bumblebees native to the Northeast. So who knew that there were that many different bumblebees? I also like to show this. So in November, the USDA came out with a new hardiness zone map. And the way they figure these out, they take the minimum temperature in the winter for each sector over the last 30 years and they average it. And the change is pretty dramatic. The further north you get, I have one with New Hampshire, and the whole Northeast Kingdom is different now. But you can see, if you can figure out where you exist here, you probably went from a 5 to a 6, is my guess. Which is, you know, there's pluses and minuses, but to me, it just extends our growing season. Maybe we can grow things we never thought we could. So actually, I was just thinking about that. I have a bunch of perennial vegetables in my garden. And when I chose the ones that I planted, I didn't want to go beyond a zone 5 because I was zone 4. But now I'm zone 5. So maybe I can take another look and maybe some zone 6 perennials in the proper habitat will grow for me. So I'm pretty excited about, you know, revisiting all of that, and fruit trees and berry bushes. So, okay, so now the way I organize this talk is by the month. So I'm going to talk about what is blooming for each month and the food, you know, what you can get from it for food for people. So paper birch and hazelbird. I got a slide for each. So paper bird, they both have catkins that have pollen. And they start turning, you know, they start getting ripe in March. And some critters, I mean, if there are any pollinators out, you know, they'll certainly benefit from that. They are pollinated by wind, but still they're food for wildlife. And you can tap all the birch trees, black, you know, yellow, all the birch trees can be tapped for sap, which you can just drink, or you can boil it down. You gotta boil it 100 to 1, so it's a little more fuel than maple syrup, but it does make a tasty syrup. And of course, birch trees are beautiful year round. That's a shot of them on a rocky ridge across from, like on my property, but across from my edible forest in the winter. And hazelbird. So there's all kinds of crosses. I know the Cornell Research Farm in Roseboro is doing a trial in hazelbirds now, and he's planted over a dozen different varieties to see which do best. So they make a delicious nut. They're a nice hedge plant because they grow very tall, about maybe, you know, up to 20 feet tall, and multiple branches coming up from the base. So there's a windbreak from the ground up with these plants. They like the drainage, but they can take some shade, and they're quite attractive when they have the nuts in the what do you call it, husks, and then pretty colors in the fall, and in the spring they bring some color into the garden. Early on, when nothing else is green, has color rather. If you can harvest them before the squirrels, then you go. So now we're into April. So there are a lot of early blooming berries. Juneberry, gooseberry, and honeyberry, all native. So there are native gooseberries. They're not all native, but there are native. So Juneberry. So this is also known as shadbush and Saskatoon. There's several names for it. They grow wild in my woods, maybe around here. They're the first trees that if you see like something, a tree with white blossoms in the middle of the woods in the understory, and early in the spring, before anything leaves out, that's a Juneberry. So mine grow on our rocky ridges. And there are cultivars that you can plant, both trees that grow to maybe 20, 25 feet, like Autumn Brilliant and Princess Diana are a couple of cultivar names, or you can just get bushes that are easy to pick. And there's a number of those. So they're in the apple family. So if you have heavy clay like I do, they may not do well for you. These do not do very well for me. They're very prone to different diseases because the ground is so saturated so much of the time. But if they do fruit for you, they're gonna fruit in June. They're like a small blueberry. Very, they're kind of tasty. I don't like them, but some people think they're okay. I think they taste insipid compared to some of the other fruits, but the birds love them. And they turn lovely colors in the fall, and the trees have a very graceful form, and they let a lot of light in underneath, so you can grow lots of stuff under them. They don't have any kind of dense canopy. Honeyberries. So these are native to the Arctic Circle, to the Northern Hemisphere, all around, and they've been cultivated commercially in Russia and Japan for many, many years. They're cultivated in Canada, and they're just started to be cultivated in the US. They flower really early. They're impervious to frost. So, they're gonna fruit regardless. You do need 2 different cultivars for pollination. So, if your nursery only has 1, you may not get fruit. So make sure they order 2 for you. They can take some shade. So there they are, and they can take drought, and they don't need acid soil. No pests. So compared to blueberries, I feel they're much easier to maintain. You do need to net them just before they start turning blue, because the birds love them. And like blueberries, it takes about 2 or 3 weeks for them to get sweet after they turn blue. And if you don't net them, you wouldn't have any. But other than that, they're an attractive round, bright green bush with nice little green leaves. And the berries are delicious. They have juice that runs magenta and very complex flavor. You can pick them when they're a little tart, and you can process them or freeze them any way you would blueberries, and you can eat them fresh. I find that when they sweeten up, they're kind of an oval shape, but when they sweeten up, they puff out into more of a square shape, as you can see in that bottom center slide, and then they're pretty sweet. Even in the winter, I don't think, not much to look at in the fall, but in the winter, a lot of the stems have these wooden collars on them, as you can see in that shot. So they're kind of attractive even when they're bare of leaves. Gooseberry. So there are native varieties. They bloom very early. The pollinators love them. Mine are just right like that now. A little later, my honeyberries were done by mid-June this year. I mean, this year, up my way, everything is 2 to 3 weeks old. I've never seen this before. And it's interesting, let's put it that way. Okay, so gooseberries are thorny. They do need good air circulation. They're prone to fungal disease. So you want to make sure, there's some good air circulation. There's a pest of them that'll strip the leaves. If you invite lots of birds into your garden, they may get those little green worms before they decimate the plant. But even if they do strip the leaves, the plant comes back. It's not the end of the world. And I wouldn't spray for them personally. And the berries are delicious. If you wait till they ripen on the vine, they can be very sweet, but you can pick them while they're still tart and kind of crunchy and process them into gooseberry pie, gooseberry jam. They have a lot of pectin, and when you make a jam, it thickens up as soon as it starts to boil, so there's no work. Anyway, they're tasty, very tasty. If you have questions, I'm going to try to stop with time for them at the end. Okay, so violets. So now we're down to, we did some woody stuff. Now we're down to, still in April, some herbaceous plants that have flowers. Oops, let's go back to that slide. Okay, so violets. So violets bloom early and also sometimes later in the late summer. The leaves and the flowers are both edible. Strawberry flowers are also edible. And of course, with strawberries, you have 2 kinds. You have the June bearers, like the wild strawberries, that only bloom and flower and fruit in early summer. And then you have the day neutral or ever-bearing strawberries that will flower and fruit through the entire season if conditions are right, if there's enough sun and moisture. So the garden strawberries, I'm not sure, I think those are just the June. So the ones that, I'm trying to think for a second. Which ones flower first? I think the ones, the June bearers flower a little before the everbearers. Okay, now we're into May. So these are all native food producing plants that bloom in May. Start with American plum. There are lots of native plants. I happen to be familiar with American plum. It's a small tree, only 15 by 15. It can take, they use it to hold riverbanks, so it can take the rise of the water above the ground for a short period of time. I planted mine right next to the bank of my pond, right in the bank of my pond, and I'm really happy there. Beautiful flowers in the spring. Fruits about this big, pretty consistent fruiter. We leave them on the vine, though they will ripen to a sweet flesh, but the skin still stays pretty tart. And pretty colors, pretty colors in the fall. There's a pollinator on one of the flowers. Just a pretty easy to manage. The only thing I pruned in this tree is where it's coming, where the branches are going across that banister where I have a little walkway, so I don't want them in my way. They're thorny too. So I pruned them out, but other than that, I've had pretty carefree production until this year, for 12 years. Something's going on this year with my plums. I don't know what, but it's okay. Okay, pawpaw. So this is native to the mid-Atlantic states. It's an understory germinator. You need to shade it. You can see my little, I hammer in pallet slats to shade it, with the tallest one to the south when it's little, but as soon as it gets high enough to grow beyond them, it doesn't need the shade anymore. Beautiful, interesting flowers that are pollinated by flies of all things. So it's said that if you have some kind of carrion that you lay on the ground near the tree, it attracts the flies and it's more likely that they'll be naturally pollinated. There are ways to hand pollinate them as well. But this year, so mine have flowered. I have 3 trees, maybe 9 years old, 8 or 9. They flowered for 3 or 4 years. This is the first year when they're getting fruit to develop. So that's what it looks like, lower left. The fruit can be the size and shape of a mango. And inside, it's very tropical looking tree as well. Inside, it tastes like vanilla custard or banana custard. They don't have any shelf life though, but you can freeze the flesh. So you take out those big seeds and just freeze it, and then you can use it any way you want for, indefinitely. They're just very tropical looking trees, very dense with leaves. They leave a lot of organic matter on the ground. And I've been told that they might have some insecticidal qualities, the leaves. So if let's say you have a tree that caterpillars really like to climb up, maybe if you scattered some of these leaves around the base, it would deter the caterpillars. I don't know, it's just speculation, but very interesting tree. Personally, when I was zone 4, I tried 3 grafted cultivars and none of them survived. The only things that have survived for me are seedlings. So the only thing with seedlings is you don't know what the quality of the fruit's going to be. But if you get them from a reputable nursery, usually they bred even the seedlings for decent fruit. So I planted 4 from 4 different nurseries, figuring, well, if one of them's good, then the trees also sucker. So you can dig up the sucker and it's true to the seedling. So if I find one, once they start fruiting, where I really, really like the fruit, then I'm going to dig some suckers. And basswood. So this is native in the woods where I live. Is it native here? It's also known as American linden. Well, the leaves are edible. You can use them like when they're really young and fresh. You can use them like lettuce and salad. And also the flowers can make a lovely tea. The tree itself is beautiful. I mean, if it grows, it can grow in the shade when it forms this elegant, that's under an oak tree in my woods. It forms that elegant shape where they can grow in full sun too. And they get immense. They get huge trunks and huge canopies. So a pretty versatile tree can grow in the wet, also wet and shade, sun and dry, well drained, so very versatile and food plant, red bud. I love these. These are native also, a little south of here, maybe here, I don't know, but you know, things are moving up, but the flowers are edible and the red bud, and also I haven't gotten the pods yet because I don't think I've had good pollination, because I only have one tree that's really bloomed consistently, but the pea pod, the pods, it's a legume, it fixes nitrogen. So the pods are edible too in the green state, just like Chinese pea pods. Beautiful heart-shaped leaves that start out red and turn green and then yellow in the fall. A gorgeous shape to the tree. It can take some shade. It doesn't like wind, it doesn't like wet heat. But other than that, it can be a beautiful specimen tree, or you can group them. I use them as nitrogen fixers in my edible forest. And you get at least 3 seasons, even the 4th season, because the trunk is so beautiful with that vase-like form, even in the winter, I think they're quite attractive. All right, now we're into some bushes, beach plum. So when you hear beach plum, what kind of soil do you think of? Mine are growing in heavy clay. Who knew? And they're so productive. Two springs ago, we had 4 frosts in May, right into the 28th of May. Remember that. Knocked out all the flowers, almost all the flowers of my fruit trees, some of my berry bushes. These guys had an abundant crop because they flower a little later. They have a small, I think I have a slide. Yes, I do. They have a small fruit about half an inch apart across. They make wonderful jam. You can eat them fresh. There's like a pit inside like a cherry pit. They make wonderful jam. They're a big bush, so about 8 feet wide. I prune to open the center, or you can train them to one stem and have a small tree. And pretty colors in the fall. The plum curculio doesn't bother them because they bloom and fruit a little later than that pest is around. So, and just beautiful flowers in the spring. Sand cherry. Okay, that tells you the name, sand. It likes really good drainage. I have heavy clay. Mine have not done super well for me. I haven't found a spot where the drainage is good enough for them, but they also have flowers like the cherry tree, only they're just a small bush. It tends to be a sprawling bush. The fruit is good size, like a sweet cherry. And if you leave it on the vine long enough, the flesh inside gets super sweet. The skin remains tender. But they're beautiful berries and they're beautiful cherries. And then they turn a nice crimson color in the fall. So if you have the right habitat, these might do well for you. There's some more in May, some more Irish cranberry, both pneumonia, all native. Irish cranberry. This is a great bush for a wet spot. I have a section of my garden where the soil is completely saturated, and these are just thriving. They're big bushes. They'll be about 10 by 10 or 12 by 12. In nature, they grow like on the edge of swamps, that kind of thing. Although they can take a little drier ground. With full sun, you're going to have more production of berries, but they can grow in partial shade as well. And four seasons of interest. Flowers in the spring, of course, pollinators love all flowers. When the berries start turning in midsummer, they have a nice contrast with the green leaves. And then in the fall, the leaves turn crimson. The berries will stay on the bush almost all winter long. If there isn't a lot, if in a drought year, there's a lot of pressure and mine got eaten in the fall and early winter. But last year, for example, they stayed till the spring when the songbirds come and then eat them. So, you have that visual interest in the winter as well. And you can cook them. So you can make kind of, first you had to wait until a lot of frost. When they soften up, they still are going to be very, very tart. So you have to add a lot of sugar to make them palatable, but you can make a sauce out of them, like, a condiment like cranberry sauce. It has a different flavor, probably an acquired taste, but still an edible berry and great for wildlife. Wild currant, this is one of my favorite native berry bushes. So this cultivar is called Crandall, Crandall. It'll only grow about 4 by 4. Beautiful yellow flowers, very aromatic flowers in the spring, which is why I believe it's called wild currant. And there are other names for it. This is the one I know. Black currants that are less pungent than the European kind that ripen. You know, it started out August last year when we had a zone 7 winter. They ripened in late July. This year, who knows? I'd say late July to mid-August, they're gonna ripen a little later than the European currants. And quite delicious. You can use them any way you use them, a currant, you can make jam, you can. I like to freeze them and throw them in oatmeal or like rice pudding, stuff like that. And lovely, first of all, the leaves have that intricate shape and then beautiful colors in the fall. It also, it can take full sun, a big drought tolerant. Aronia, this is a cool plant. So there's different cultivars. There's Nero that grows to 4 feet. There's Viking that grows to 8 feet. There's 6 feet. There's Mackenzie that grows to 8 feet. And then there's other varieties that I'm not familiar with. Beautiful flowers in the spring. Bunches of heavy bunches of berries, late in the summer, I'd say they ripen in September, turn purple or even a black. Very high in antioxidants. Commercially, they use them and the color so intense. They use these to color fruit beverages, to color yogurt commercially. When you eat them fresh, they're pretty tannic. They'll make your mouth pucker, but when you process them, when you cook them, they mellow out. One year I brought some to a couple of chefs I know raw, and they went, we don't like them. And then I cooked them up and I brought them and they loved the sauce. So once you cook them, they're great. I like to make jam with them and mix them. They don't have any pectin. So I mix them with either raspberries that are either right frozen or red currants that are frozen to make the jam. And those things have a lot of pectin because I never add pectin or anything. I just put sugar and my fruit and no water, no pectin. So it gels up nicely if you mix them with something that is high in pectin. Anyway, beautiful colors in the fall. Now, these plants can take shade, they can take wet, they can take high and dry and full sun. They're very versatile. No pruning. The deer do like them. The deer like them. Oh, I see, I'm touching that. The deer like them, so, what can I say? But the only thing I've done with them sometimes is the branches are so laden with berries that they actually bend down and touch the ground. So I might have to stake a branch up. That's it. That's it. And they suffer. So they'll spread a little bit by suffering. They recommend you plant them 6 feet apart because they get some of it. Okay, more May grapes and alpine strawberries and Danian fruits that I talked about a little, and red raspberry. So let's see what I got here. Grapes. Well, now that I'll tell you, now that the hardiness zones are getting warmer, you can grow a whole bunch of grapes, even if you're up north, maybe that you never could grow before. I mean, like some of the middle Atlantic kinds of grapes. I could never grow them, but I might try them now. All I have are cold hardy grapes up my way because it was zone 4 when I planted them. But anyway, grapes need a trellis, and a well-pruned vine can produce 40 pounds. So they're very productive. They need good ventilation, and a southeast exposure is the most desirable because they are prone to fungal disease. So if you plant them with a southeast exposure, that early sun dries them from the night dew. And so you're better off than, let's say, western exposure, something like that. And good air circulation. Mine are on a fence that faces southeast. And my Brazilian is from the southwest, and there's a driveway to the right, and there's a pond to the left, so there's nothing obstructing the wind. And I don't do any spraying. They say you can't grow grapes organically. Not true. I've not done any spraying. I've never had a problem with my grapes in that location. And I have a fence 100 feet long, and I have grapes every 8 feet along that fence. Now, of course, I don't have a whole vineyard full of grapes with nothing else. Oh, the other thing I do with my grapes that I do want to mention is I have all kinds of herbaceous stuff growing in the even perennial sweet peas. They grow right up over the grapes. And when they start shading the grapes, I rip them down. But if you go to most vineyards, you'll either see bare ground or you'll see some kind of sod, right? Well, it's like free lunch for the pests. I have all kinds of herbaceous stuff. Think about in nature. How do grapes grow in nature? They'll grow up amongst, woody stuff, herbaceous, and they're very persistent. They'll just grow right up to the light. So I'm kind of modeling, nature in the way I'm growing them, and they're super happy. Strawberries. So I just wanted to point out, so the alpine strawberries tend to be clumpers. They can take some shade, alpine, they're also day neutral, so they'll continue to bloom and flower throughout the season, like I said, providing we have enough light and water. They're very tiny, pointed berries, but very intense in flavor. So they can make a nice edge to a bed, or I just put mine on a north facing slope with a hugelkultur now, and I put some more in. And then the two upper ones, not everyone realizes there are cultivars of strawberries that have colorful flowers. So the first one is called Tappan F1, I believe, or Tarpon F1. I got the seeds from Johnny's, and it does have an edible berry, not huge, but bigger than the alpines, and it has those nice deep rose colored flowers, and it runs. It's a runner. And then the one on the upper right is called I'm blind. Starts with a G. I also got the seeds from Johnny. It's more of a clumper, but it has bigger berries and those larger pink flowers. So just for example, and I've had them producing berries right into November. I have some of them next to a stone walkway, so it's like a warmer microclimate, and they're good. And then, of course, that's some other kind of, I think that might be just a day neutral strawberry that has white flowers. And sometimes they turn pretty colors on the ground in the fall. They form good ground coverage for runners. Ooh, yeah. So now we're into June. Although I think mine started flowering in May this year. But anyway, so here are a bunch of nitrogen fixing locusts that I'm going to talk about, and the American persimmon. So locusts are nitrogen fixers. Now, the black locust is considered, even though it's native, it's considered invasive in New York. But if you have a stand of them nearby, you can plant them. That's allowed. So my neighbor has a stand of black locust, so I can plant them. I did. Because, first of all, the flowers are edible, and they're very attractive to pollinators. They make great honey. The wood, the plants are nitrogen fixers, so they're converting that nutrient from the air to a form the other plants can use. The wood they grow extremely quickly. Mine grew 15 feet. They started out this high, 15 feet in 3 years. The wood is very high in BTU. It's great for firewood. Also doesn't rot, so it's great for fence posts. And the canopies, since they're legume, it's kind of tiny leaves and open canopies, so light comes through. What I've done, I have them along the northeast side of my garden, so they're not shading what's inside. And I'm trimming them up. So I actually planted, even though it's not the ideal setting, I planted some grapes along that fence also, and I'm trimming up my locust, so there's plenty of ambient light getting to those grapes. And if I had them above a fruit tree, like the honey locust I planted in the middle of the garden, above fruit trees, I'm trimming them up. If I have to trim them up to 30 feet, I will. So there's, again, at least 10 or 15 feet of ambient light above my fruit trees. So the edible forest is in many layers. I started the tallest trees in the land. Anyway, if you have an orchard, you can plant these. They'll provide the nitrogen for your orchard trees, and will also, you can still have plenty of light for your apple trees or peaches or whatever you want. Okay, so black locust, those are fence posts made with black locust. The honey locust also has an edible pod. So when the pod is green, you could scrape off the inside. It's like a thick, viscous, sweet substance. You can eat it. The pods are huge. They can be 8 inches long, a couple inches wide. They're male and female trees, so only a female will, of course, have pods. And I planted several of them. I didn't know what they were. And then last year, I saw pods on one of my trees and I went, it's a girl. So anyway, if you wanna plant, honey locust, you wanna plant the thornless variety, because those thorns are like daggers on the honey locust. The black locust has small thorns along the trunk, which is another reason why I planted them on the outskirts of my garden, so people wouldn't be rubbing against them. But the honey locust, you want a thornless variety. And also, I want to point out the lower left. So all of the legumes, you can coppice them or pollen them. So you can cut them down to the ground, that's coppicing, or you can pollard them, which means you cut all of the upper branch, all the branches at whatever height you want, and they'll grow back. So that's a row of honey locusts that they kept at 15 feet rather than 80 by pollarding them every few years. So it's just what you can do to keep, it contained in your space. All right, and then purple robe locust, I see my time is going here, so I'm gonna hurry a little. Is like a black locust, but it has those beautiful purple flowers. Not quite as tall. I don't think it suffers quite as much. And they're beautiful. I've interplanted them in my orchard type rows to provide, the flowers are edible also. Pollinators love them. And they're just beautiful. American persimmon. This is another native fruit-bearing tree, native to the understory of mid-Atlantic states. I'm growing them successfully. I have one, it's a meter cultivar, it's grafted. And it has fruited for me for probably 3 or 4 years now. The flowers are like that. They're underneath the branches. They're kind of subtle. And then the middle little insert is like a very immature fruit. That's what they look like. And then they don't ripen until late in the season. They need a few frosts. They might even have some dark brown smudges on the outside, to show they're really ripe. I gave a talk in Virginia and I was told that okay, I was told 2 things. First of all, they'll fall on the ground, the deer will eat them. And also, possums. Possums will pull up the tree. But if you're lucky, you can get them before either one of those. They make great pudding and they have seeds inside, so you have to get rid of the seeds. But you can use the flesh. And for mine, the skin stays kind of tannic. So if there's a way, I don't know how to do it yet. Next time I have to figure it out. The next time I give a talk, I can tell people. There's a way to get the flesh only, and then you can make puddings, pies, you can throw them in smoothies. I like to just eat them off the tree personally and just suck the flesh around the seeds and save the seeds to plant another day. Beautiful. Some of them have lovely colors in the fall. They suffer. So I planted in Yates cultivar. It's grown really great for me. It's flowered every year, but it's never had fruit. So I don't know why. The meters had fruit, and I have another meter that's even smaller that's fruited. So I let it suffer. So now it has a whole family of persimmons around it. And this year, one of them was flowering. Now I realize that's not true to the graft. That's true to the rootstock. But the graft one isn't fruiting. So maybe the rootstock will fruit. So I'll let you know if you call me. I guess I'll know if there's fruit forming in a couple of weeks because it's flowering now. Okay, we're still in June, so here's some more natives. So thimbleberry. Thimbleberry is a native berry, like a raspberry. It's a bramble. It has a fruit that's more shaped like a thimble, but somewhat like a raspberry. The leaves look like maple leaves. It grows, it likes the shade, it likes wet areas. So, if you have that kind of place, they're good. I've noticed it's a trap crop for Japanese beetles. So Japanese beetles would rather eat the leaves of this than my raspberries. So if you have a problem with Japanese beetles with your roses or raspberries, you might plant some of these natives and they might do the job for you. Of course, black raspberry is native and flowers in June. Elderberry, I'm going to talk about elderberry. So elderberry is one of those flowers that attract those parasitic wasps. The fruit, of course, the flowers are edible. Now, I'm not sure of this fact, but you know, if you read about it, it says you have to cook every part of the elderberry or it's poisonous. But then I read that those are the European elderberries, that the American elderberry is not poisonous. I don't know what's the truth. To be safe, probably should cook them. Now, I know in Europe, they bread the flowers and they fry them. They also make a liqueur, they make a syrup that they mix with sparkling water out of the flowers. And of course, the berries themselves can be made into wine, into pies, into jams, and also, of course, they have a lot of medicinal value to boost your immune system. So people make tinctures and syrups out of them for that purpose. It's a suckering plant. It has shallow roots. It'll grow in one season. It'll grow from nothing to a stem this tall, flower and fruit in one season. By the fourth year, they're not productive anymore. So either the stems will die on their own, or you can cut them off to make room for the new shoots. Mine got girdled really badly this year by rodents, but you know, they're coming up from the rootstock and they have a few flowers. Also, elderberry are a trap crop for birds. If they're ripening around the same time as your grapes, the birds would prefer the elderberries. So you can actually do that intentionally to protect your grapes, so you don't have to mess them. Oh, and these are just some natives now into July. These are just some native plants. So I recently learned that every part of the milkweed is actually edible for people. Who knew that? But of course, they're very attractive for butterflies, and they smell wonderful. I let mine grow in my vegetable garden because why not? You know, I mean, I'm not using machinery, so it's all handwork, so who cares? Mountain mint is another native mint that's very attractive. Joe Pyeweed, I've seen both bumblebees and honeybees on the same flower head of Joe Pyeweed. Those are some kind of bugs that are, I'm not sure what they are, but they like milkweed. So one year I saw them all in the milkweed. Okay, and what are they?
Milkweed bugs, I hope there's, yes, yes.
There you go, all right. And then of course, the anise hyssop, which has an anise flavor. You can shred the flowers and sprinkle them on anything. The leaves are edible too. It's a perennial herbaceous plant that is delicious. I think I planted one or threw some seeds, I'm not recall, 12 years ago, and they're coming back up all the time. They like it high and dry with full sun. Very attractive to pollinators. There's 3 bumblebees on that one star, and great cut flowers too. And then here's just some other wildflowers that have, they all have medicinal applications. Blue vervain that just took up residence around my pond, and black-eyed Susan that just decided to grow under my beach plums. And I did plant some coneflowers that have self-seeded a little bit. And again, in July, actually, my blackberries bloomed in June this year. Wild blackberries will bloom early, but mine didn't bloom this early before. I have a thornless cultivar called Triple Crown. It's done really well for me. And we had a zone 7 winter last year, so it didn't get winter, and it does fruit on second-year canes. So I'm having a bump of that this year. And I planted them in my orchard rows on the south side of trees, because they tend to be sprawling. They're kind of their growth habit is between an upright and like a black raspberry. So, and if you let them touch the ground, they will root, just like a black raspberry. So anyway, so I trellis them on my trees, so I don't have to build a trellis. And of course, Gloriosa daisy was actually a cross between a black-eyed Susan and a coneflower and some other third thing. And it's a self-seeding, short-lived perennial, I would say. New Jersey tea. So this is the woody plant that's native. In fact, during the Revolution, when all the tea was thrown into Boston Harbor, The Americans used the leaves for tea because they didn't have any British tea. But it's also nitrogen fixing. It has medicinal applications. The flowers are very tiny, again, very attractive to some of the smaller beneficial insects. Native. Yeah, and it's very small. It's very low growing. So if you need a nitrogen fixer that's sort of close to the ground, it's useless. And August, so here we have fall raspberries blooming, the native asters, goldenrod, all very important to have. Mine just grow wild, mine just move into my garden. I love them. I mean, because I know they're beneficial, they're native. And here's a couple of fruit plants for August for us. So groundnut and hot peanut. So these are both native vines. They're both nitrogen fixing new legumes. The groundnut has really attractive, and they're herbaceous. And they only grow to maybe 6 feet, 8 feet, that's it, and they die back. The groundnut has tubers underground that are like little dark beads on strings, and you can cook them like you cook potatoes. They're very nutritious. And the hot peanut has little more subtle flowers, likes moist north-facing slopes. They could both take quite a bit of shade. And it has both pods that are edible, and right near where the stem and the root meet, they have these little peanut-shaped things, either above or underground that are also edible. And then, of course, in September, you still have your wild asters blooming, and hops have lots of pollen in, which there are native varieties of hops. October, we have another flush of flowers, maybe from your violets and sunchokes flower. And of course, the strawberries are still flowering, as are the asters and the goldenrod in many cases. So sunchokes have a tuber that's edible. They grow very tall. They're in the sunflower family. They're a native food plant. The Native Americans cultivated them very widely. Very nutritious carbs, but they don't spike your glycemic index. So they're good for diabetic people. And I've sliced them thin and cooked them like sweet potato chips and fried them in oil. I use them in a stir fry they're crunchy like water chestnuts. I use them instead of potatoes in a frittata, very versatile. I wait till spring to harvest them because the winter sweetens them up. This past year, though, I had so much rodent pressure that the rodents pretty much ate them all before I got to them. But anyway, November, we still have things blooming. And I just wanted to point out, it's really important. And of course, the persimmon is ripening. It's really important to leave all these seed heads over the winter and really into the spring. Because a lot of beneficial insects will winter over in the stems or the galls. So cleaning up your garden in the fall is not kosher anymore. Wait until spring. And I've even heard that some people just cut the tops off. What I do is I wait till things start greening up, and then I have a row of coneflowers like along inside that fence I showed you with the locust, and I just stump them. So they're gonna decay right in place. And oh, I'm done. Yay, perfect time. This is great. So, Coldstream Farm has a lot of native, very well priced, good quality. You can get different lengths and different quantities. And when you get to 25, the price just plummets. So it's really, and Prairie Moon Nursery, specializes in seeds of native plants. And they can give you combos. So if you have a shady, moist area, they can give you a combo for that specific habitat. So, and they also have some bare root plants that they sell. And then, if you want to know some people are really, it's really important that the natives they plant are from their exact area. So you can maybe Google that, native food plants of New York, to see if you can find examples that are native to the region. But what's native? The Native Americans moved stuff around for thousands of years before we came there. So how do we know? My book, which I'm happy to sign for you. And I just want to mention real quick, I pitched a television show based on My Garden, My Book to my local PBS station, and they're in the process of producing 6 episodes. So it'll be a garden show on public channels, that's gonna go national. It'll be available for all the stations in the nation, starting maybe next spring. So if you're interested in having your local station carry it, talk to them. And, that's it. That's my contact.
Yeah, we have tons and tons of time for questions. Thank you so much. It's so fun to hear from you. I hope that I get to come visit you sometime. And I definitely watch your TV show.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do we have questions in the room? We'll start and then we can go to Zoom. Anybody have a question? Yeah, we've got one over here, sorry.
I'm wondering, like, how and why are locusts considered invasive if they're native?
Yeah, well, they suffer. And maybe seed a little bit. So, I mean, I'm not the person to ask that question. There's a lot of hype about invasives, in my opinion. And very few of them are really problematic. And what I've noticed too is with herbaceous stuff, something will come in, it'll stay for a year, 2, 3, 4, and then you'll receive and something else will come in. If you wait.
Repeat the questions.
Oh,
I spoke something up there.
well, we can repeat the next question. Is that?
Yeah.
Nothing wrong with the question. Yeah, no.
I was interested when you mentioned you have plenty like soil, because I also have this.
Yeah.
And, do you have any top 3 that you terribly, spending my soil?
I think I mentioned 2 of them, Juneberry and the sand cherry.
And I think I did really well.
Oh, well, almost everything does very well. I mean, I put a lot of organic matter on the surface. I've made some hugelkultur mounds, some big ones, some 50-foot long ones to loosen the soil and improve drainage for some fruit trees. Apples hate it, but apples are hard to grow under any circumstances. I mean, right now we had an inch and 3, oh, I'm sorry, question. The question was, what are the 3 things that do worst in my clay soil? What does well? My apple trees have, we had an inch and 2/3 of rain this week. And I checked my apple trees that I have on a southeast facing slope in clay, and these are young seedlings, and they all have lots of little yellow dots on their leaves. My Juneberry have had fungus growing out of the fruit. I mean, last year and this year, the only 2 years I've had any fruit, because we had a very, very dry spring, both years, and relatively dry winter. So, apples, forget about the apple family. That's all I have to say. Yes,
Do you use any type of pest management on your farm?
I invite a lot of birds in. I have ponds that invite a lot of amphibians, dragonflies. I have a lot of herbs scattered around that both attract beneficials and deter some pests.
But nothing like neem oil or any of these fungicides.
I don't have to spray. It's a pain in the butt. I don't enjoy it. I only did a trial spray. Somebody came to my garden and said, my plums didn't look really healthy. This is 2 years ago. She said, you should spray with, like something nutritious for the, like foliar spray. So I started spraying with a combination of every 10 days, if I could, of diluted,
All right, I think the closer you are to the owl, the more feedback.
No worries.
That's what we're learning. So stay away from the owl.
Yeah, diluted, no,
We have another
I'm sorry. It's my lunchtime. Seaweed and fish emulsion. Okay. And the person who advised me said they should be better in 2 years and you're not gonna have to spray anymore. Well, my trees don't look any better, they're worse this year. So I stopped. And I'm not gonna try that again. So I just think, and these are my plum trees. I mean, they're still leafing out. They're loaded with plums this year. I know they have some kind of disease, because I checked with the cooperative extension, that kind of oozes sap out of the branches, but maybe they'll recover. And if not, I'll plant something else. Okay. Yes.
Could you describe how you built your culture moon?
How did I build my agriculture mounds? Yes, I started with wood from the woods. And I didn't dig a trench, I just piled, first I did a cardboard, how did I do agriculture mounds? I did a cardboard footprint. I laid the wood on tight, because you don't want any space in there for rodents to move in. And then I just piled all kinds of organic matter on top, no matter, I cut weeds from across the road, cattails, doesn't matter. Garden waste, vines from my squashes, just throw it all on, leaves. And then I top it with wood chips. Couple of inches wood chips that don't have any weed seeds in them, and I usually do it in the fall. And then the winter snows and, fall rains, winter snows kind of moisten it. I don't water it. If you ever tried to water a pile of leaves, it takes forever. And then, by spring, I can plant it.
Width, height?
Well, I have a couple of 50 feet long that were actually got dirt piled on them from my ponds by a backhoe. But the ones I built by hand are about, about the size of this table.
Yep.
And there's a picture in my book. I built 10 in the woods. So in the woods, if you build a hugelkultur mound, you don't have any root competition from the trees. And in my woods, the water table is actually above the ground for a good part of the year. Get above the water table, and it's free. I mean, it's not like building a raised bed where you need to get the lumber, the part in the soil, all that. So I think it's a great technique. Yes.
Thank you.
I noticed that my son goes kind of already invasive in my garden.
Yeah.
Do yours really take over?
Oh, yeah, good point. Sunchokes are invasive. You need to plant them you need to know beforehand how you're gonna control them before you plant them. So, yeah, I mow around them to maintain them. And you have to dig them every year, because if you don't, like daffodils, they're gonna choke each other out, and then that'll be the end of your bed. So that's another way. If you mow to contain them and then you don't dig them, maybe they'll die. The one in back.
Where one of the very top, you actually met them to prevent birds from getting them. And the other question is, I know you have livestock and you're talking.
And what?
Livestock?
Yeah.
You integrated into that.
Good questions. So first, when I met my berries, only the honeyberries and the gooseberries, the early berries, because that's when I have more pressure. Raspberries, oh, by the way, mulberries are trap crops for birds when it comes to raspberries. So my mulberries are fruiting right now, my raspberries are fruiting, my preludes, my early ones, and the birds hardly touch the raspberries. Plus, yeah, so the only things I net are those two things. Sometimes grapes, but now I have a bird pooped in the middle of my grape fence, and there's an elderberry tree growing up there, so I don't feel like I am left. So my adage is, if I like it, I leave it. If I don't like it, I weed it. So I saw this elderberry one. Now I know they're a trap crop for birds when it comes to grapes. It's right where it should be. So I'm not even netting my grapes anymore. And when I was talking in the South, I said my only problem with grapes is the yellow jackets started puncturing them. And this man in the audience said, well, then it's time to pick them. Oh, okay, I didn't know that. Okay. There was somebody here, yes.
That is not because
No, I didn't. Over there,
you said the milky is edible for humans.
all parts of it.
I know it's poisonous for the livestock, so how do you manage it when it's not?
Well, our livestock are native, we have goats that are crosses. I mean, we don't have any fancy overbred breeds that don't know anything anymore. So, we have Red Devons and Belted Galloways that are, native from the British Isles. They're smarter than we are when it comes to what to eat and what not to eat. So I'm not worried about it. They won't eat something if it's not good, or if they need to eat something poisonous to deal with a parasite, they know just how much of it to eat. Yeah.
Her problem was we ended up with some of our hay.
With what? Some in your hay. Yeah.
Yeah. We use some experts to really because I found it was.
No,
I understand what it's going for.
right, well, then just find a different paid provider. Somebody here, yes,
Yeah, I'm growing, I have a red raspberry bush at my house. And it got plenty of berries this year, but they're really small. Is there a reason for
I
that?
don't know, is it too dry?
Yeah, it needs more water?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you for seconding that motion, whoever said yes.
Black raspberries do the same thing.
Yeah, black raspberries are even more vulnerable in my experience to drought, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
I'm sorry, I'm not repeating the questions, I'll try to remember. Was there someone back here?
good.
Yes,
Honeyberry, how easy would it be to find a native variety? Or are you growing a native variety?
well, they're all native, so, okay,
Oh, to the United States.
when I say native, I mean to this continent.
Yeah. I'm aware of that. I looked this up and I know that there's in Canada, they have a colony there cultivating it.
Yeah.
Have you had experience with the native varieties or, with the native variety or?
You mean versus the ones from Russia or different?
Yeah.
Well, I think if you just ask your nursery if they're knowledgeable, they can tell you which is which.
Yeah, but have you been able to source the native ones from the United States?
Why would you want to?
Oh, just wondering, yeah.
I mean,
I would actually.
okay,
That's
well,
fine.
I mean, I think there is information out about that. I think I recently read that the natives tend to flower sooner and the others are flower later. And I do remember checking some nursery where they actually told you which were natives and which were from, the eastern continent. So I think there's a way to find out, just do more research. Yes.
do you have black walnut trees and do you grow anything edible underneath them? Okay.
There are a number of, I have planted English walnuts. I didn't want to plant black walnuts because it's too hard to crack them.
Yeah.
And plus, in my region, they're just considered nuisance trees because they seed everywhere and they deter, especially the apple family, don't like them, but elderberries, pawpaw, will grow under them. Yep, mulberry will grow under them. There's a lot in, I think, Martin Crawford would, in the back of Martin, well, which, no, it's a different book. Anyway, in my book, I list some of the plants that will grow under them. Oh, here we go. Black raspberries will, but regular raspberries and, blackberries won't. I mean, it goes on and on.
Yeah.
So there's lots you can grow under them. Yeah.
I have elderberry and so.
Yeah. So the question was, what can you grow in the black walnut?
Thank you. Just in the interest of time, I think you're gonna be around during our break. We have one question on Zoom and then I want to make sure there's time for if anybody else on Zoom has a question. Lenny's asking regarding the plants like sand cherry that like sand, well-drained soil. Do you amend the soil with compost to help these plants? And if you do you see a difference? Or you just leave them in the sand?
I don't have sand. I have heavy clay. So, nothing's helped them. I mean, I'm not gonna succeed with everything I try. This is one that isn't really thriving under my conditions. I'm not gonna, the whole point of an edible forest is to minimize human labor going forward. So if there's anything that requires, TLC, I'd rather plant something that doesn't require any special treatment. Yeah.
Someone mentioned to me using biochar.
Yeah.
Could improve the soil. I never tried it.
It's highly recommended. It's very, I've looked into it a little bit. It seems to me like a real challenge to make. I wouldn't really even want to attempt it. I mean, I know in the Amazon, the indigenous people use biochar to totally enrich the understory of their, their tropical jungles. Yeah, if you want to, you can buy it. I think it's expensive. It certainly is worth using it because all of the nutrients kind of adhere to it. So it's a valuable amendment. But see, the whole idea of this edible forest Because you don't want to tie yourself down to having to elements. You want nature to do it. So you have nitrogen fixing plants, you have nutrient accumulating plants, you have, all kinds of other things that. You have all the, all of the levels, so when the leaves fall, it's naturally mulched, on and on and on.
I think I'm gonna unfortunately cut us off so we can transition. But thank you so much again for being here and